1984, written by George Orwell, is more than just a novel, more than just a fictional story. It reveals the horrors of a totalitarian and authoritarian regime, and how power as a catalyst reveals the darkest and ruthless side of human beings. The more you think about the events that take place in Oceania and the steps taken by the party to be in power, the more you feel the devastating reality of such a world. Oceania, a state controlled by the party, a world where there's no privacy, people are always being tracked and kept under control. A figurehead like Big Brother leads the party. Big Brother is omnipresent and almost a godlike figure, keeping an eye out for every individual all the time. Though it's unclear if he really exists, he comes off more as a symbol used by the party. He represents the face of the regime. He's a symbol of power and authority. And symbols don't die. The society in Oceania is divided into three sections. The inner circle. They make decisions and hold the highest position of power within the party and live a very comfortable life. The outer circle. The bureaucrats, managers and party workers who implement the policies and are also subject to the same. They are under strict surveillance and scrutiny through telescreens. Telescreen is a two-way device that broadcasts party's propaganda and also has the constant surveillance of thought police. Then comes the proles. They are the working class that comprise 85% of the population. They are responsible for hard manual labor and other low-status jobs. Despite being the largest, they are not subjected to such surveillance as the members of the outer circle. The party doesn't consider them as a threat. They are left to live as they are. Heavy physical work, the care of home and children, petty quarrels with neighbors, films, football, beer, and above all, gambling filled up the horizon of their minds. To keep them in control was not difficult. The majority of the population was so busy and self-absorbed in their own world that thinking about anything outside of it was not their concern. The party deliberately destroyed personal relationships and bonds. Love as an emotion should only exist for Big Brother, and loyalty for his ideology, which is the party. Anything that contradicts or is against the party's ideology is considered a thought crime, and anyone who commits it should be immediately reported. This resulted in neighbors reporting neighbors, colleagues reporting colleagues, and even children reporting their parents at times. Imagine your friends or family reporting you on suspicion of not being loyal to Big Brother and his ideology. That was the state of Oceania. The reported convicts were then vaporized, killed and erased from all documents and records as if they never existed. Through this, any potential threat to the party, mentally or physically, is eliminated before it can ever take root. In Oceania, truth is not the objective reality, but it's the party's manipulation based on the current objective. If the party said 2 plus 2 is 5, then indeed it is. The society in Oceania is built on hate and fear. Daily events like 2 minutes hate speech, where civilians are asked to scream, shout and pass insults on screen, where videos of individuals who stood against the party were played, primarily of Emmanuel Goldstein and the Brotherhood, who are the face of resistance against the party. Civilians brought out their darkest side in this 2 minutes hate speech, because in mobs we don't exist as individuals. The mob itself becomes an individual. We just become an extension of the mob's collective will. With the ever-changing ideology of the party and to keep the people always under control, the party not only wants control over actions but also over thoughts of an individual. For this, it uses a technique called doublethink, where people hold contrary beliefs at the same time and accept both as truth, like war is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength. This is reflected in the functioning of their various ministries as well, where the Ministry of Truth is responsible for propaganda, rewriting history, and spreading false information. The Ministry of Peace is responsible for handling war and military affairs. Ministry of Love is responsible for creating fear, strict surveillance, and severe punishment among civilians. It is this paradoxical nature of the ministries that creates confusion, making it harder to think clearly and come to a conclusion. And somehow, if someone did manage to think clearly, to counter them, the party used language. Newspeak is the official language in Oceania, where words are constantly being removed, especially the ones that threaten the regime. This lessened the power of communication, as lack of words wouldn't let complex ideas against the party be conveyed, thereby limiting the freedom of thought and possibility for any kind of rebellion. Also, Oceania was always at war. The constant warning of bombings kept the people in a state of constant fear and always mentally occupied. The wars between Oceania and the other states, Eurasia and East Asia, are continuous and ever-changing, with the enemy and allies constantly being changed. The purpose of the war was not victory or conquest. Instead, it was used as a tool to control the population with distraction and instilling fear with constant external threats. War is also used to keep the people in a state of deprivation, preventing economic stability or surplus, therefore not allowing the rise of middle class who can challenge the regime. Honestly, it's unclear if states like Eurasia and East Asia even exist. In 1984, it's hard to decipher what's truth and what's propaganda, because the line is so vague. Any information the party gives comes from their idea of getting control and retaining power. 1984 shows how fragile and malleable human minds are, how our memories needs references to bring certain thoughts back to the surface. And since the party did everything it could to match all the records, history and documents to its current reality, it became much harder for people to accept the reality in their head as the truth. He who controls the past controls the future. He who controls the present controls the past. In such an extreme authoritarian regime, one thing that certainly crosses fear is love. Love is the driving force of our life, be it for an individual, profession, or freedom. Despite the consequences, love gives us hope to some extent, along with courage. In 1984, Julia, one of the main characters, breaks the shackles of slavery as she confesses her love to Winston, the main character, through a note stating, "I love you." The note is a spark of what it means to be human, a need for emotional connection and longing for love. It's also an act of resistance against the regime in a state dominated by fear and control. It somewhat symbolizes humanity in its essence, of finding new ways to live no matter what the conditions are. Despite party's strict prohibition against personal relationship, Winston and Julia manage to form a bond that defies the regime, love and lust being the predominant emotion that brought them together again and again. Julia says to Winston in one of the chapters about the party, "It's one thing they can't do. They can make you say anything, but they can't make you believe it. They can't get inside you." In a state like Oceania, where everything is manipulated and controlled, it's hard to truly accept the reality in our head, seeing everyone around you being deluded by what's being served to them. Generally, people tend to accept anything as the truth, depending upon the number of people who believe it as the truth, primarily from the fear of being discarded. Unlike all, Winston chooses to believe in the reality of truth rather than the perception of it given by the party. There was truth and there was untruth, and even if you clung to the truth against the whole world, you were not mad. The way 1984 is written, it's almost like an observation of the state, and Winston's character gives the reader hope along with the existence of the resistance clan Brotherhood and its leader, Emmanuel Goldstein. As the novel proceeded, there was some kind of underlying hope within me that things would change, but that never came true. Things kept getting darker and darker. As the story proceeded, all the efforts that Winston makes eventually seems useless, and deep down, he too was aware of it. Both Winston and Julia were aware that any moment could be their last, as Winston started taking serious steps towards his rebellion against the party. Winston's rebellion against the party has deep hypocrisy. On one hand, he wishes to end this demonic regime that dehumanizes individuals. However, he agrees to harbor violence and murder if needed to overthrow the party. This tells us that no matter how noble our intentions are, it doesn't justify our immoral means to achieve it. Soon, the inevitable happens. Winston and Julia are captured. It's revealed that the Brotherhood and Emmanuel Goldstein are two creation of the party to provide hope to people like Winston that resistance is possible. The party even manipulates the idea of rebellion, ensuring that no real opposition can form, because everything, including the idea of resistance, is under the party's control. All of the things we see in Oceania revolves around power, and it being the foundation for the creation of INSOG. The party doesn't seek power for anyone's good, but for its own selfish goals. Not for wealth, not for any sort of luxury, but only for power. Pure power. Power to control people as you want. Power is not the means, it's the end. Winston's capture isn't just a normal capture leading to death, but a series of extreme torture designed to put him through a re-education process, ultimately forcing him to fall in love with Big Brother. The party doesn't simply want to eliminate those who rebel against them. They want to break them down completely, reshape their minds, and make them loyal followers. That's power to them. Power is in inflicting pain and humiliation. Power is in tearing human minds to pieces and putting them together in new shapes of your own choosing. Only once they have succeeded in turning rebels into believers is when they eventually finish them. In spite of all this, Winston doesn't seem to give up on the party's ideology. He stays consistent on his remark of the never-dying human spirit that will eventually dethrone the party. Their fall is inevitable, to which O'Brien replies, "We control life, Winston, at all its levels. You're imagining that there's something called human nature which will be outraged by what we do and will turn against us? But we create human nature. Men are infinitely malleable. Or perhaps you have returned to your old idea that proletarians are the slaves will arise and overthrow us. Put it out of your mind. They are helpless like animals. Humanity is the party. The others outside are irrelevant." This seems quite true. On one hand, we see the party members feel all the emotions that a human feels, of losing power and fear of uncertainty. But on the other hand, the majority of the population are just the victims of the consequences the rich fear. Fear and ignorance have crept so deep into the civilians that the party doesn't even consider them as threat. In fact, O'Brien goes on to tell them as irrelevant. O'Brien considers Winston to be the last of man. His breed of humans who rebel regardless of the consequences no longer exists. He is the last of the man. One of the most pivotal scenes in the book is when O'Brien shows Winston 4 fingers and asks him how many fingers he sees. When Winston insists that he sees 4, O'Brien increases the pain through torture until Winston's perception and understanding of reality become pliable. The purpose of this was for Winston to not come to any sort of conclusion. The pain inflicted upon him should make him realize that despite there being 4 fingers, the reality is what the party tells. It can be 5, sometimes 3, and sometimes they are all at once. Truth is what the party says and not what one sees. After making Winston go through weeks of mental, physical, and emotional torture, O'Brien reveals him in front of the mirror. It shows the condition of a rebellious body, the state of a rebel who set out to fight against a demonic regime. Malnourished, disfigured, and complete loss of identity, Winston feels a sense of shame and self-loathing seeing himself in the mirror. Seeing Winston weeping, O'Brien asks Winston that can he think of a single degradation that has not happened to him. And Winston replies that he hasn't betrayed Julia. Despite all the hate, torture, and psychological manipulation, one thing that remained constant is Winston's love for Julia, and the fact that he hasn't betrayed her. Though he had revealed all her habits, her past life, confessed the most trivial information, yet the feeling of love he has for her didn't change. O'Brien understood what he meant and didn't need any explanation. The final stage awaited. Winston is taken to room 101, where people are made to confront their deepest and darkest fears. A cage filled with rats is placed near Winston's face, the rats eagerly waiting for the latch to be opened. Even before they are released, the trauma and fear within Winston becomes unbearable, and in a moment of desperation and panic, he screams for Julia to take his place. "Do it to Julia, not me. I don't care what you do to her," Winston said. O'Brien's mission is a success. The love Winston had for Julia is shattered, and the party achieves its goal through fear and torture. The party has achieved what it set out for. This raises a profound question about our own deepest fears. What kind of fear could reside within us that could drive us to harm our own loved ones? Does fear override love? In 1984, it does. Winston and Julia are eventually released, with both knowing that they have betrayed each other. Once a symbol of defiance, are reduced to mere shells of their former selves, obedient, broken individuals who have been mentally and emotionally defeated by the party. As the book came to its closure, Winston sat in a cafe awaiting for the news of war. I wondered what could possibly be the end of the story with a few pages remaining. Was there still hope? Would people be free again? Was there a better tomorrow still on the horizon? Soon, the news of war broke out through the telescreen. Oceania had won the war, occupying the whole of Eurasia. Drops of tears fell from Winston's eyes. Nothing changed around him, everything seemed the same, but the struggle was finished. The last human in Oceania had won the victory over himself. Winston gazed up at Big Brother's enormous face. Staring into his eyes, he realized that he finally loved him. 2 plus 2 was 5 indeed.